guys ready for this? Are you guys ready for unnatural earthquakes of the large kind? Fracking, you guys have heard that term, right? They take wastewater, they inject it deep inside the earth. They inject it below the water table, correct? Purportedly, below the water table. Now when they do this, right, water begins to fill gaps in the rock. Here's the problem. These small earthquakes that we're feeling, they always happen around those areas where they do a lot of fracking. But did you know those small earthquakes are not relieving pressure, newly built pressure from these low-frequency seismic waves, right? Rock is a conductor of those low-frequency waves. And with the injection of water, it's like connecting a bunch of rocks together without the gaps in the rocks, those natural gaps that were broken in earthquakes and caused silence in earthquakes. Without those gaps, those rocks are glued together. Seismic waves will travel from one clump of rock to another, and depending on what type of rock and what the strata actually is built like, it will determine that the flow, of course. But something has happened, something I've noticed. Something that set off one of the alarms on something I thought I would not see this early. There's a special algorithm that looks at earthquakes, right? Looks at small earthquakes, 4.0 and smaller only, nothing larger. It looks at these earthquakes to see the synchronization rate of these earthquakes so we can track the low-frequency seismic waves, right? In other words, say, for example, you have 15 earthquakes, 15 to 20 earthquakes, right? You look at the time interval between those earthquakes. If they happen within the same hour, you look at the time interval between those earthquakes. You do a small formula on the VL, or low-frequency waves, and how it is actually conducted through the rock to estimate the speed. If at any time you have a consistent wave, and what I mean by that is one wave traveling from one side of a place to another, and you have multiple earthquakes in between, but they are happening at intervals that match the wavelength, right? How fast that wave travels, we get a problem. When they start to synchronize like that, right? Fracking causes tiny earthquakes, small earthquakes all the time. I know it's disputed, but I have no time for disputing something I know very well. When they cause those earthquakes, if they were separate, then fine. As of late, that's not what's happening. We had alarms going on that showed synchronization of these earthquakes that are quite shallow, right at the depth of wastewater injection, and that those waves are synchronized. The alarms went off. The track is leading into places where we don't need to shake up, right? In the middle of two fault lines, right there, smack dab in the middle, often if it's a sandy region, you can pick up the dirt and you'll feel something consistent like flour, talcum powder. That's when the two rocks have ground material together and it kind of spits it up, and it's like talcum powder right there in the middle. Well, we've had some dropouts in sensors. We've had some overpressured sensors and some jump rubs, I'm going to call them. Now, jump rub would be the land deep down, right? Just being still one moment, but all of a sudden it jerks in motion the next, and then stops, and then it jerks in motion. We're starting to have those a lot on the West Coast, deep in the ground. They're not really felt up top. They do register, but they're not felt up top. But they're increasing. And what that means is, whenever that happens, if you were to take a heavy object and tie a rubber band to it, and you had that object on a flat surface and you pull that rubber band, you're going to get so far, then when you get far enough, right, where the pull of that rubber band equals the weight of that heavy object, that object is going to move suddenly, not gradually, suddenly, right? It'll kind of move and then stop until the weight of the object overwhelms the pull of that rubber band again. So those two forces, when they interact, they give a great deal of information, of timing and everything else towards very large earthquakes. So we have in the making 2 or 3 large earthquakes right here in the USA at the wrong time, in the wrong places. But it's building up now. Right? It's building up now. Earthquakes, by the way, the pressure of these plates is always building. It's always. An earthquake is the release of that pressure. Right? When people are fracking, and they're trying to take that, injecting wastewater deep below the waterline, they're actually increasing the potential of those, of seismic activity. Even with the smaller earthquakes and things that you have, they still work together for some of the bigger earthquakes that we could have, because the earth is constantly, the land masses are in motion, and they're speeding up, right? Now, this cycle of the land masses being in motion, and that's how you have mountain ranges. That's why you have certain fault lines that are quite prominent, like California. I know everybody is worried about the New Madrid, but if you look at the direction of the plates, you wouldn't worry so much about the New Madrid. That's why people always ask me about the New Madrid, because it's such a vulnerable place, right? I never really worry about that because of what the direction of the plates, the travel of these plates is altering every single day, very subtly, but they're altering in direction. That's why I don't really worry about the New Madrid. But we have other fault lines that are formed, a lot of them, in Oklahoma, of course, and Texas, from what they're doing there. But we have other fault lines that are quite dangerous. And we're going to start seeing earthquakes in New York, right? Earthquakes in the Great Lakes in Canada. Places that you wouldn't think large earthquakes would actually hit, right? You wouldn't think that. We're going to see much of that. Much. You're going to start to see these continuous fires, coal fires, that are beneath the USA. They're going to start breaching again, absorbing the land or burning up the land. You're going to start seeing that, especially when we have these water differentials. As the earth continues to go through its processes and everything else, folks, get yourselves ready. For some folks, it's going to be a challenging time. For others, a bitter time. It will. But I want you guys to keep this in mind. You guys remember when they found the animals and the bees, specifically the bees, that were feeding off plants and they were frozen in place? And they didn't really go over the age of those bees, only to find out it was a certain species, and it did not happen that long ago, right? They also found the same thing, but it wasn't in ice. It was in rock. It was in a cave. They found something similar to that. They found a portion of a bug that was embedded in a flower with pollen going through it, which means the bug was caught off guard in the middle of feeding by cold temps. They found crystal damage in the leaf itself, right? In the rock and what was left itself. So what that means is this: that instant freezing event happened all over the place. But the rest of the world warmed up, turned muddy, and a lot of that stuff, right, just kind of sunk into the mud and dissipated. It was preserved in the north. The reason I bring that up, while we're having hot temperatures, not one of you should be surprised if we have one of those vortices open up near the Great Lakes and everything below it freeze. Instant freeze, a flash freeze. Everything frozen in a matter of seconds. Don't be surprised. If people are caught in that, that's instant death. Instant. But I suspect that will happen too. The weather is changing, right? It's changing big time. These temperate forest regions during the winter times or during certain parts of the year are going to turn very cold. Other portions of the earth are going to turn very hot. Then it will be quite difficult to really discern the seasons by the temperatures period. It's affecting life, it's affecting crops, it's affecting everything. And it's going to begin to come to a head this year. Some of you who know about these storms, who listen to folks who are knowledgeable in areas of geology, earthquakes, right? Start taking note of what is possible. Because you may face all of it this summer. All of it.
This has been the Confidential Report. For even more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel today. And please show your support by clicking the like button on this video. For even more stories and news you deserve to know the truth about, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching the Confidential Report.